The gunshot that killed her husband echoed through Murphy's, California, long after his body hit the saloon floor. But it was the silence afterward that truly destroyed Penelope Davenport. The year was 1878, and the mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills had seen its share of violence. But something about watching a woman lose everything in a single moment made even the hardest men look away. Penelope had arrived in Murphy's 3 years earlier as a bride of 19, full of hope and dreams about building a life in California's gold country. Her husband Marcus had promised her a future of prosperity, a home filled with children, and a love that would last forever. What he gave her instead was debt, humiliation, and a bullet meant for someone else that found his heart anyway. The town whispered about her in the weeks that followed. They said she was broken, that the light had gone out of her eyes, that she wandered through the mercantile like a ghost touching items she could not afford. The Chinese laundry workers who knew her kindness stopped greeting her because she no longer seemed to see them. The minister's wife tried to bring her soup, but Penelope left it untouched on the porch until the dogs got to it. Even the children who once loved her smile now crossed the street when they saw her coming, frightened by the hollow shell she had become. Murphy's called her damaged beyond repair, and perhaps they were right. The debts Marcus left behind swallowed everything. The small house they rented went first, then the furniture, then every piece of jewelry she owned except her mother's locket. She took a room above the bakery, working before dawn to pay for it by scrubbing floors and kneading dough until her hands bled. The baker's wife was kind enough, but even her patience wore thin when Penelope would stop mid-task and stare at nothing, lost in memories of the life she thought she would have. Winter arrived early that year, bringing frost to the Golden Hills and ice to the streams that fed the remaining mining operations. Penelope turned 22 in November, alone in her tiny room with not even a candle to mark the occasion. She had stopped writing to her family in Boston months ago, too ashamed to tell them how completely she had failed at the life she chose. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a woman aged beyond her years, thin and pale, with dark circles under eyes that rarely showed emotion anymore. Yates Grayson rode into Murphy's on the first day of December with snow threatening in the clouds above. He was a cowboy through and through, though that profession meant something different this far north than it did in Texas, where he was born. At 25, he had spent the last 7 years working cattle drives, breaking horses, and taking whatever honest work he could find as he made his way west. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of summer grass. His face showed the weathering of outdoor life, but there was something gentle in his expression that made people trust him instinctively. He had come to Murphy's looking for winter work. The ranch outside town needed someone who knew horses, and Yates knew them better than he knew most people. The owner, a gruff man named Sullivan, hired him on the spot after watching him calm a skittish mare that 3 other men had failed to handle. The job came with a bunk in the stable and 3 meals a day, which was more than enough for Yates. He had learned long ago that a man needed very little to be content as long as he had honest work and a clear conscience. His first week in town passed quietly. He worked with the horses during the day, ate his meals with the ranch hands, and occasionally rode into Murphy's for supplies. It was on one of these trips that he first saw Penelope Davenport. She was leaving the general store with a small package clutched to her chest, her head down against the wind that whipped through the street. Her dress was too thin for the weather, patched carefully but clearly worn. What struck Yates was not her appearance, but the way people seemed to avoid her. A woman with 2 children pulled them aside as Penelope passed. Two men standing outside the saloon stopped talking and watched her with something like pity in their eyes. She seemed oblivious to it all, moving through the world as if she were completely alone in it. Yates found himself following her at a distance, curious about who she was and why the town treated her like a ghost. She walked to the bakery and disappeared through a side door. He stood there in the cold for a moment before shaking his head at his own foolishness. It was none of his business. He had learned the hard way not to get involved in other people's troubles, but he could not stop thinking about her. That night in the bunkhouse, he asked the other ranch hands about the woman in the worn dress. "That's Penelope Davenport," said an older cowboy named Frank. "Her husband got himself killed about 6 months back, left her with nothing but debts. Town feels sorry for her, but what can anyone do? She won't accept charity, and she's got no skills beyond what any woman knows. She's working herself to death trying to pay off what he owed." "What happened to her husband?" Yates asked. Frank shrugged. "Wrong place, wrong time. Two minors got into it over a card game, and Marcus Davenport was standing between them and a bullet. Don't think it was meant for him specifically, but dead is dead either way. He wasn't much good to her alive, if you want the honest truth. Gambled more than he earned, made promises he never kept. But she loved him anyway, or thought she did." Another hand, younger and less kind, added, "She's been strange ever since. Won't talk to anyone, barely looks up from her work. My sister says she's damaged in the head now, that she'll never be right again." Yates felt something hot and defensive rise in his chest. "Seems to me losing your husband and everything you own might make anyone struggle. Does not mean she's damaged." The young hand laughed. "You are sweet on her already, and you have not even met her. Good luck with that, Grayson." Half the single men in town tried to court her proper after a respectful time passed. She won't even acknowledge they exist. Yates said nothing more, but the conversation stayed with him. He had known loss himself. His own parents died of fever when he was 17, leaving him and his younger sister alone in the world. He had worked himself nearly to death for 2 years to keep them fed and sheltered, only to lose his sister to pneumonia the winter she turned 15. That grief had nearly destroyed him. He understood what it meant to have the world see you as broken when inside you were just trying to survive one more day. Sunday came, and Yates rode into town for the church service. He was not particularly religious, but his mother had raised him to respect the Sabbath, and the habit had stayed with him. The small church was crowded with families, miners with their wives, shopkeepers and their children. Yates took a seat in the back and listened to the minister talk about forgiveness and redemption. He saw Penelope slip in halfway through the service. She sat alone in the very last row, on the opposite side from him. Her hair was pinned neatly, and she wore a shawl that looked hand-knitted, probably by her own fingers. She did not sing the hymns or bow her head during prayers. She simply sat there, staring at the altar with those empty eyes. When the service ended, people filed out quickly, eager to get home to Sunday dinners. Yates waited, watching as Penelope remained seated. Everyone else left, including the minister who was greeting people outside. Still she sat there, alone in the empty church. Yates approached slowly, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. She did not look up even when he stopped at the end of her pew. "Madam," he said quietly, "are you all right?" For a long moment she did not respond. Then slowly she turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were blue, he realized, a deep blue like the sky just before twilight. They were also completely blank, as if she were looking through him rather than at him. "I am fine," she said. Her voice was soft but flat, without inflection. "Thank you for your concern." "It is cold out," Yates continued, unsure why he was pushing. "And it looks like snow is coming. Can I walk you home?" "I know the way," Penelope said. She stood, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "I have walked it every day for months." She moved to pass him, and Yates let her go. But as she reached the church door, something made him call out. "My name is Yates Grayson. I am working at the Sullivan Ranch. If you ever need anything at all, you can find me there." She paused, her hand on the door. Without turning around, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. But I need nothing from anyone." Then she was gone, disappearing into the gray afternoon. The snow came that night, heavy and thick, blanketing Murphy's in white. By morning, the town looked like something from a fairy tale, beautiful and clean. Yates spent the day helping clear paths and checking on the horses, making sure they had enough hay and that their water had not frozen. It was hard work, but he liked it. Horses were honest creatures. They did not judge or whisper or call anyone damaged. 3 days passed before he saw Penelope again. He had ridden into town for supplies, and as he tied his horse outside the general store, he heard raised voices from inside. Curious and concerned, he pushed through the door. Penelope stood at the counter, her face pale but her chin raised. The storekeeper, a heavy-set man named Morton, was shaking his head firmly. "I am sorry, Mrs. Davenport, but I cannot extend any more credit. You still owe from last month, and my suppliers need to be paid. It is nothing personal." "I understand," Penelope said quietly. "But I need flour and coffee. I will pay you by the end of the week. I give you my word." "Your word does not pay my bills," Morton said, though he looked uncomfortable. "I have been patient, but I have a business to run." Yates saw Penelope's hands tremble as she clutched her empty basket. She nodded once, turned, and walked toward the door. As she passed Yates, he saw something crack in that blank expression just for a moment. It was humiliation, raw and painful. He let her leave, then approached the counter. "How much does she owe?" Morton sighed. "About $3, give or take, and she wanted another dollar's worth today. But it is not your concern, Grayson." Yates pulled 4 silver dollars from his pocket and placed them on the counter. "Put this toward her account. And give me a bag with flour, coffee, sugar, and whatever else a person might need. I will take it to her." Morton's eyebrows rose. "That is generous of you, but I should warn you she will not take it kindly. She is proud." "Then I will be persuasive," Yates said. He left the store with a heavy bag and walked in the direction Penelope had gone. He found her in the narrow alley beside the bakery, leaning against the wall with her eyes closed. Tears tracked down her cheeks, though she made no sound. "Mrs. Davenport," Yates said gently. Her eyes flew open and she quickly wiped at her face. "Mr. Grayson, I did not hear you approach." He held out the bag. "I was getting supplies anyway, and I bought too much. Thought maybe you could use these." She stared at the bag, then at him. "I am not a charity case." "I did not say you were," Yates replied. "I said I bought too much and thought you could use these items. That is different." "That is a lie," Penelope said flatly. "You saw what happened in the store. You are pitying me like everyone else in this town." "Maybe," Yates admitted. "Or maybe I just think you have had a hard time and could use a kindness. Does it matter which?" "Yes," she said fiercely. "It matters. Everyone in Murphy's looks at me and sees something broken. They whisper about poor Penelope who lost her mind along with her husband. They think I cannot hear them, but I can. I hear every word, and I am tired of being the object of pity." Yates set the bag down on the ground between them. "I lost my parents when I was 17, he said quietly. "Fever took them both within a week of each other. Then I lost my sister 2 years later. Pneumonia. She was 15 years old and I could not save her. For a long time after that, I was not quite right. I would forget where I was sometimes. I would start conversations and lose track of what I was saying. People looked at me the same way they look at you now." Penelope's expression softened slightly. "What made you better?" "Time," Yates said. And realizing that grief does not make you broken. It just makes you human. The people who could not understand that were not worth my concern. But the ones who offered kindness without judgment, who let me heal at my own pace, those people saved my life. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Why do you care what happens to me? I do not know, Yates admitted, but I do. And I would like to be your friend if you would let me. Penelope looked down at the bag of supplies. I cannot pay you back. I am not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Yates smiled slightly. Just that you take the food. And maybe sometime you would let me walk you home from church, or buy you a cup of coffee at the cafe, nothing more than that. She bent down and picked up the bag. It was clearly heavy, but she held it against her chest. 1 cup of coffee, she said finally. That is all I can promise. That is enough, Yates said. They had their coffee the following Sunday after church. The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Yates ordered 2 cups and 2 slices of apple pie, ignoring Penelope's protest that she only agreed to coffee. They sat by the window, watching the street outside. At first, conversation was difficult. Penelope answered his questions in short sentences, volunteering nothing. But Yates was patient. He talked about the horses he was working with, about the ranch, about growing up in Texas. Slowly, she began to relax. She told him about Boston, about her parents who had disapproved of her marriage to Marcus, about the journey west that had been equal parts terrifying and thrilling. I thought I was being so brave, she said quietly, staring into her coffee. Leaving everything I knew to start a new life. I thought love was enough to build a future on. Maybe it would have been with the right person, Yates said. She looked up at him. Marcus was not a bad man, he was just weak. He could not control his vices, and he made promises he had no ability to keep. But he did love me in his way. And you loved him. I did, Penelope admitted, but I also resented him. Is that terrible, to resent your dead husband? It is honest, Yates said. Which is better than lying to yourself about who he was. Something shifted in her expression then. The blankness receded a little, and he saw a flicker of the person she must have been before tragedy struck. You are easy to talk to, Mr. Grayson. Yates, he corrected. And you are easy to listen to. They finished their coffee and pie, and Yates walked her back to the bakery. At the door, she turned to him. Thank you, she said, for treating me like a person instead of a problem. You are a person, Yates said, one I would very much like to know better. She nodded slowly. Perhaps next Sunday, if you are still interested. I will be, he promised. The winter deepened, and so did their friendship. Every Sunday after church, they would have coffee together. Yates learned about her love of books, though she could no longer afford to buy them. He brought her novels from the ranch house library, ones that Sullivan's wife had collected over the years. Penelope read them voraciously, and they would discuss the stories during their Sunday meetings. He learned that she had wanted to be a teacher before she married, that she loved mathematics and could calculate figures in her head faster than most men with pencil and paper. He learned that she missed the ocean, even though Boston Harbor was nothing like the Pacific coast. He learned that she had a dry sense of humor that surfaced occasionally, surprising them both. In turn, she learned about him, about his love of horses and open spaces, about his fear that he would never amount to anything more than a drifter, about his dreams of someday owning his own ranch, a small one where he could breed horses and live simply, about the guilt he still carried over his sister's death, the feeling that he should have done more to save her. You cannot save everyone, Penelope told him one snowy afternoon. Believe me, I know. I could not save Marcus from himself, no matter how hard I tried. But I should have tried harder, Yates said. Should you? Penelope challenged gently. Or do you just need someone to blame and you are the easiest target? Her words struck something deep inside him. He realized she was right. He had been carrying guilt for something that was never his fault, just as she had been carrying shame for being the victim of circumstance. As January turned to February, Yates found himself thinking about Penelope constantly. When he worked with the horses, he imagined her watching him, asking questions in that quiet voice. When he ate meals in the bunkhouse, he wished she were there to share them. When he lay in his bunk at night, he thought about the way her eyes had started to come alive again, showing emotion and warmth where before there had been only emptiness. He was falling in love with her, and the realization terrified him. The other ranch hands noticed, of course. Frank teased him good-naturedly about being smitten with the widow. The younger hands made jokes about trying to fix broken things. Yates ignored them all. What he felt for Penelope was not about fixing her. It was about recognizing in her something precious and strong that everyone else had overlooked. In early March, the weather turned warmer. The snow began to melt, and the first hints of spring appeared in the greening hills. Yates decided to take Penelope on a proper outing if she would allow it. He planned it carefully, wanting everything to be perfect. On Saturday afternoon, he arrived at the bakery with a horse-drawn buggy he had borrowed from Sullivan. Penelope came to the door in her worn dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked surprised and uncertain. "What is this?" she asked. "An adventure," Yates said. "If you will trust me, we will be back before dark." She hesitated, then nodded. "Let me get my shawl." He drove them out of town, following the road that wound up into the hills. The landscape was beautiful, golden grass dotted with oak trees and wildflowers just beginning to bloom. They talked easily, their conversation flowing naturally after months of Sunday meetings. Yates stopped the buggy at a spot that overlooked the valley. Below them, Murphy spread out like a toy town, and beyond it the mountains rose up in shades of blue and purple. He helped Penelope down and spread a blanket on the grass. From a basket, he produced bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of lemonade. "When did you plan all this?" Penelope asked, clearly touched. "I have been thinking about it for weeks," Yates admitted. "I wanted to show you something beautiful, wanted you to see that there is more to life than work and struggle." They ate slowly, savoring the simple food and the warmth of the sun. Penelope lay back on the blanket, closing her eyes and turning her face to the sky. Yates watched her, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her hair caught the light. "I feel different lately," she said suddenly. "Lighter, somehow, as if something that was crushing me has lifted." "Maybe it has," Yates said. She opened her eyes and looked at him. "It is because of you. These past months, our Sundays together, your friendship. You have given me something to look forward to, a reason to keep going beyond simple survival." "Penelope," Yates began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. She sat up, turning to face him fully. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something, and I am afraid it will ruin everything, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore." "Tell me," she said softly. "I am in love with you," Yates said. The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it is too soon. I know the town thinks you are not ready for this. I know you probably still love your husband and cannot imagine feeling that way about anyone else. But I had to tell you because every day I do not feel like lying, even by omission. You have become the most important person in my world, and I think you are perfect in every way that matters most." Penelope stared at him, her eyes wide. "Perfect? Yates, I am the furthest thing from perfect. I am damaged. The whole town says so." "The town is wrong," Yates said firmly. "You are not damaged, Penelope. You are surviving. You are strong and resilient and kinder than anyone I have ever met. You work yourself to exhaustion to pay debts that were not yours. You hold your head high even when people whisper. You have every reason to be bitter and angry, but instead you are gentle. That is not damage. That is Grace. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, Yates said quickly. I just needed you to know. We can keep being friends if that is all you want. I will not push for more. Stop talking, Penelope said, and then she was kissing him. It was soft and tentative at first, as if she were remembering how. Then it deepened, became something real and present and full of feeling. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I did not think I could feel this way again, Penelope whispered. I thought that part of me died with Marcus. But you have awakened something I thought was gone forever. Do you love me? Yates asked, hardly daring to hope. I think I do, Penelope said, or I am beginning to. Is that enough? It is everything, Yates said and kissed her again. They stayed on that hillside until the sun began to set, talking about the future in a way that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Yates told her about his dream of owning a ranch. Penelope admitted that she had been so focused on surviving that she had not let herself dream at all. Dream with me now, Yates said. Tell me what you want, Penelope thought for a long moment. I want a home, she said finally. A real home, not a room above a bakery. I want children someday when the time is right. I want to wake up in the morning and feel happy instead of just grateful to have survived another day. I want to build something lasting with someone who truly loves me. I can give you all of that, Yates promised. It might take time and it will not be easy. But I swear to you, Penelope, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you have everything you deserve. I believe you, she said. They courted properly after that, though the town had plenty to say about it. Some people thought it was too soon, that Penelope should mourn longer before taking up with another man. Others whispered that Yates must be desperate to want damaged goods. But there were kind voices too. Frank and the other ranch hands defended them. The baker's wife, who had watched Penelope work herself raw for months, said it was about time the girl had some happiness. Even Sullivan and his wife approved, inviting Penelope to Sunday dinner at the ranch house. That dinner was significant. Mrs. Sullivan, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, took Penelope aside after the meal while the men talked horses in the parlor. That young man is besotted with you, she said plainly. And unless I miss my guess, you feel the same. I do, Penelope admitted. It frightens me sometimes. I failed at marriage once already. You did not fail, Mrs. Sullivan said firmly. Your husband failed you. There is a difference. Yates Grayson is not Marcus Davenport. He is steady and true, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. Do not let fear keep you from happiness. What if the town is right? Penelope asked quietly. What if I am too damaged to be a good wife? Mrs. Sullivan took her hands. Listen to me carefully. You survived loss and poverty and grief that would have broken lesser women. You kept working and kept living even when it would have been easier to give up. That is not damage, my dear. That is strength. Any man would be lucky to have you, and Yates Grayson knows it. Those words settled something in Penelope's heart. She returned to the parlor to find Yates watching for her, his face lighting up when their eyes met. She realized then that she truly was healing, that the hollowness inside her was filling with something warm and real. Spring advanced into summer, and their love deepened. Yates proposed on a warm evening in June as they walked along the creek that ran behind the Sullivan Ranch. He had no ring, just a wildflower crown he had woven from daisies and lupines. He placed it on her head and knelt in the grass. Penelope Davenport, you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that you were never broken, just bent for a while? Will you build a future with me? Yes, she said through happy tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in August in the same church where Yates had first spoken to her. The ceremony was simple but lovely. Penelope wore a new dress that Mrs. Sullivan helped her make, pale blue with delicate embroidery. Yates wore his best shirt and a new vest, his hair neatly trimmed. Frank stood up as his best man. The baker's wife stood with Penelope. The minister who had watched Penelope sit hollow-eyed through services for months now saw her glowing with joy. He spoke about redemption and new beginnings, about how love could heal even the deepest wounds. When Yates and Penelope exchanged vows, there was not a dry eye in the church. At the reception in the church hall, people who had called Penelope damaged beyond repair now celebrated her happiness. Some of them looked ashamed, remembering their harsh words. Others were simply glad to see her whole again. Penelope danced with her new husband, laughing in a way the town had never heard from her. Late in the evening, Frank approached Yates at the refreshment table. "You did good, son," he said gruffly. "Real good." "I am the lucky one," Yates replied, watching Penelope across the room as she talked with Mrs. Sullivan. "Maybe," Frank said, "but you also had the sense to see what everyone else missed. That takes a special kind of wisdom." Yates and Penelope spent their wedding night in a small cabin on the Sullivan property that the ranch owner had offered them as a wedding gift. It was modest but comfortable, with a real bed and a fireplace and windows that looked out over the rolling hills. As they lay together afterward, Penelope traced patterns on Yates's chest. "I never thought I could be this happy again," she murmured. "There were days when I wanted to just disappear, to stop fighting so hard to survive. But something kept me going, and now I know what it was." "I was waiting for you." "I was waiting for you too," Yates said. "I just did not know it until I saw you that day outside the general store." "What did you see?" Penelope asked curiously. "Someone who was lost but not beaten," Yates said. "Someone who deserved to be found." They made plans for their future. Yates had been saving his wages carefully, and with Penelope's careful budgeting, they began to see a path forward. Sullivan offered to sell them a small parcel of his land at a fair price, 20 acres with good grass and a stream. It would take years to pay off, but it would be theirs. They built their life together slowly and deliberately. Yates continued working with horses while Penelope took on sewing and mending jobs that she could do from home. She was gifted with a needle, and word spread quickly. Soon she had more work than she could handle. The money was not much, but combined with Yates's wages, they began to save. In December, exactly 1 year after Yates rode into Murphy's, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She told him on Christmas morning, placing his hand on her still flat belly and watching his face transform with joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Penelope asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Yates said. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "You have given me everything I ever wanted. A home, a purpose, and now a family." "We have given each other that," Penelope corrected gently. "The pregnancy was not easy." Penelope suffered from sickness in the early months, and the summer heat made her swell uncomfortably. But Yates was devoted, bringing her cool water and fanning her when the cabin grew too hot. Mrs. Sullivan visited often, sharing advice from her own pregnancies. Even the town seemed to rally around them, as if collectively deciding that Penelope Grayson deserved happiness after all she had endured. Their son was born on a cool September morning in 1879. The labor was long and difficult, but when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in Penelope's arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. He had Yates's dark hair and Penelope's blue eyes, and he was absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" Penelope asked, exhausted but radiant. Yates touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "What about Thomas? It was my father's name." "Thomas Grayson," Penelope said, testing it out. "I love it." Fatherhood transformed Yates in ways he had not anticipated. He had always been responsible and hardworking, but now he had a fierce purpose. Every dollar he earned was for his family's future. Every hour he worked was to build something lasting for his son. He began negotiating seriously with Sullivan about the land purchase, determined to have their own place before Thomas was old enough to remember the cabin. Penelope blossomed as a mother. The hollow-eyed woman who had drifted through Murphy's like a ghost was gone completely, replaced by someone vibrant and full of life. She sang while she sewed, laughed at Thomas's antics, and greeted each day with gratitude. The town noticed the change, and slowly the whispers about her being damaged faded away. By Thomas's first birthday, Yates and Penelope had saved enough to make a down payment on the 20 acres. Sullivan drew up the papers himself, offering them generous terms. They moved onto the land in the spring of 1881, living in a tent while Yates built their house with his own hands. It was hard work, but he loved every moment of it. This was his land, his home, his family. The house was small but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms and a main room that served as kitchen and parlor. Penelope planted a garden while Yates built a corral and a small barn. They bought 3 horses to start, planning to breed them. Life was simple but satisfying. Thomas grew into a lively child, all energy and curiosity. He followed Yates everywhere, trying to help with the horses even though he was too small to do much. Penelope would watch them from the porch, her hand resting on her belly where their second child grew. This pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she was happier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in the winter of 1882, during a rare snowfall that blanketed their little ranch in white. She came quickly, as if eager to join the world. Penelope held her and cried, but these were tears of joy. "What about Grace?" Yates suggested. "Because she is a Grace we did not even know to pray for." "Yates Grayson," Penelope said. "It is perfect." With 2 children and a growing horse breeding business, life on the ranch was busy but fulfilling. Yates proved to have an excellent eye for bloodlines, and the horses he bred were known for their temperament and stamina. People came from surrounding counties to buy from him. The money was not abundant, but it was steady and honest. Penelope's sewing business continued to thrive. She made dresses for weddings, shirts for miners, and curtains for new homes. Her fingers flew over the fabric, creating beautiful things that people treasured. She also began teaching Thomas and Grace their letters and numbers, determined that her children would have the education she had always valued. The years passed peacefully. Thomas grew tall and serious like his father, with a natural way with horses. Grace was bright and imaginative, always asking questions and making up stories. They were happy children, growing up with love and security. In 1885, when Thomas was 6 and Grace was 3, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with laughter and teasing. "How many children are we planning to have?" she asked Yates as they lay in bed one night. "As many as we are blessed with," Yates said contentedly. "Our house is full of love. There is always room for more." Their 3rd child, another son they named William, arrived healthy and strong. Penelope was now 30, and Yates was 28. They had been married 7 years, and every year had been better than the last. The ranch continued to prosper. Yates expanded the barn and added more horses to their breeding stock. He hired a young man to help with the work, giving him room and board in exchange for labor. Penelope sold her sewing to a mercantile in Stockton, which paid more than local customers. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure. One evening in the summer of 1887, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas and Grace were playing with William, who was toddling around determinedly. Yates had his arm around Penelope, and she leaned into him contentedly. "You remember the first time we talked?" Penelope asked quietly. "In the church," Yates said. "You told me you needed nothing from anyone." "I was so lost then," Penelope said. "I honestly believed I would never feel whole again. The town called me damaged beyond repair, and I believed them. And now?" Yates asked, though he knew the answer. "Now I know they were wrong," Penelope said. "I was not damaged. I was grieving and struggling and trying to survive, but I was never broken. You saw that when no one else could." "I saw a woman who deserved to be loved," Yates said simply. "Who deserved to be happy. And I am grateful every day that you let me be the one to love you." Penelope turned to kiss him. "You did not just love me, Yates. You helped me remember who I was. You helped me heal. You gave me a life beyond anything I ever dreamed possible." "We gave each other that," Yates said, echoing her words from years before. They sat together as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Thomas came over and climbed into Yates's lap. Grace settled against Penelope's side. William toddled over and tried to climb up too, and they all laughed as they made room for him. This was what Penelope had wanted all those years ago when she was hollow and grieving. A home, a family, a life filled with love and purpose. And she had it all, not because someone had fixed her, but because someone had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. The town of Murphy's had called her damaged beyond repair. But Yates Grayson had called her perfect in every way that mattered most. And in loving her exactly as she was, he had helped her become whole again. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Penelope looked around at her husband, her children, her home. She thought about the long journey from that terrible day in the saloon to this perfect evening on her own land. It had been hard and painful, and sometimes she had wanted to give up. But she had kept going one day at a time until she found her way to happiness. "I love you," she whispered to Yates. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm. By 1890, the Grayson Ranch had become one of the most respected horse breeding operations in Calaveras County. Yates's reputation for integrity and quality spread far beyond Murphy's. Men came from as far as Sacramento to buy his horses, knowing they were getting animals that were not only strong and fast, but also well-trained and gentle. Thomas, now 11, had become his father's right hand. He had inherited Yates's patience with horses and Penelope's quick mind for numbers. He kept careful records of breeding lines and sales, his handwriting neat and precise. Grace, at 8, was the family storyteller. She would sit in the barn while her father and brother worked, spinning tales that made them laugh. William, now 5, was the wild one, always getting into mischief but so charming that it was hard to stay angry with him. Penelope had expanded her own enterprise. She now employed 2 other women from town, teaching them her techniques and sharing the sewing work. It allowed her to take on larger orders while also giving employment to women who needed it. She remembered too well what it was like to struggle, and she made sure to pay fair wages. The women who worked for her were fiercely loyal, and the quality of their work was exceptional. In the spring of 1891, Sullivan passed away peacefully in his sleep. His wife decided to sell the ranch and move to San Francisco to be near her daughter. She offered Yates first right to purchase the remaining land adjacent to his property. It was a significant parcel, over 100 acres, and the price was more than fair. Yates and Penelope stayed up late that night, going over their finances by lamplight. They had savings, but not enough. They would need to take out a loan from the bank in Murphy's, something that made Penelope nervous given her history with debt. "It is different this time," Yates assured her. We have collateral, a proven business, and a solid plan. This is not gambling money on bad investments. This is investing in our future." Penelope trusted him completely. They went to the bank together and presented their case. The banker, who remembered the struggling widow Penelope had been, was impressed by the transformation. He approved the loan with reasonable terms. With the expanded land, the Grayson Ranch became a substantial operation. Yates hired 3 full-time hands and built a larger barn. He diversified, adding cattle to their horse breeding. The work was demanding, but Yates loved every minute of it. This was what he had dreamed of since he was a young man riding north from Texas. Penelope continued to thrive. At 35, she was confident and capable, nothing like the broken woman who had once scrubbed floors in the bakery. She ran her sewing business with skill, managed the household with efficiency, and raised her children with love and wisdom. The town of Murphys now held her up as an example of resilience and success. On their 10th wedding anniversary in August 1891, Yates surprised Penelope with a gift. He led her to the barn, where a beautiful mare stood in one of the stalls. The horse was dapple gray with an intelligent eye and gentle disposition. "She is yours," Yates said. "I have been training her for months. I thought it was time you had your own horse, so we can ride together." Penelope was speechless. She approached the mare slowly, running her hand down the sleek neck. The horse nickered softly. "She is beautiful, Yates. Thank you." They began riding together in the evenings after the children were asleep. Sometimes they rode in comfortable silence. Sometimes they talked about their days or their dreams for the future. These rides became a cherished ritual, a time when they could simply be together away from the demands of work and family. One evening in the fall, as they watched the sun set over the golden hills, Yates said, "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life, that I get to wake up every morning next to you, work land that is ours, raise children who are healthy and happy. It feels like more than I deserve." "You deserve every bit of it," Penelope said firmly. "You are the kindest, most hard-working man I have ever known. You built all of this with your own hands and your own integrity." "We built it together," Yates corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. Your strength, your intelligence, your love, you are the foundation everything else is built on." Penelope reached over and took his hand. "Do you remember what you told me that first day in the church? You said if I ever needed anything, I could find you." "I remember," Yates said. "What I needed was someone to see me," Penelope said. "Really see me, not as damaged or broken or pitiable, but as a person with value and potential. You gave me that gift, Yates. You saved my life." "You saved mine too," Yates said. "I was drifting before I met you, just moving from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to build something permanent. You gave me a home." They rode back to the ranch as twilight deepened into night. The house glowed with lamplight, and they could hear the children's voices inside. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had built together from the ruins of Penelope's first attempt at happiness. The 1890s brought both challenges and triumphs. A drought in 1893 tested their resources, but they managed through careful water management and selling off some of their cattle. A harsh winter in 1895 took several horses, but the strong breeding stock survived. Through it all, Yates and Penelope faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. Thomas turned 18 in 1896 and announced he wanted to study veterinary medicine. It was a bold dream, one that would require him to go to San Francisco for training. Yates and Penelope were both proud and anxious. They had worked hard to give their children opportunities they never had, but sending their eldest son away was difficult. "Go," Yates told him firmly. Learn everything you can, then come back and help us build something even better. We will manage while you are gone. Thomas left that fall, and the house felt emptier without him, but his letters home were full of excitement about his studies. He was thriving in the city, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Grace, now 14, showed talent as an artist. She drew horses constantly, capturing their movement and personality with remarkable skill. Penelope encouraged her, buying her proper pencils and paper. Grace dreamed of perhaps becoming an illustrator for magazines or books. William, 12, was still trying to figure out where he fit. He was good with horses like his father and brother, but he also had a head for business like his mother. Yates suspected he might be the one to take the ranch in new directions when the time came. In the summer of 1897, Penelope turned 41. She and Yates were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching Grace sketch the horses in the corral while William practiced roping fence posts. 20 years, Penelope said suddenly. It has been almost 20 years since Marcus died. Yates glanced at her, trying to read her expression. Do you think about him much anymore? Not often, Penelope admitted. When I do, it is with more pity than pain. He had so much potential, but he could not overcome his weaknesses. I grieve for the life he never got to live more than I grieve for the life I lost with him. That seems healthy, Yates said. I am grateful for that time in a strange way, Penelope continued. Not for the pain, but for what it taught me. I learned that I am stronger than I thought. I learned to survive on my own, and I learned to recognize real love when it finally came along. You never doubted that I love you? Yates asked. Never, Penelope said firmly. Not from that first day you offered me groceries, even though I was prickly and proud. You have shown me every single day through your actions that I am valued and cherished. That is a gift beyond measure. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and well-maintained. The future looked bright. Do you think we will have grandchildren someday? Penelope asked. I would bet on it, Yates said with a smile. Thomas will probably find some smart young woman in San Francisco. Grace will charm some artist or writer, and William will probably marry the girl next door. I look forward to it, Penelope said. To holding babies again, but this time without the exhaustion of being the one responsible for them all the time. Yates laughed. That does sound appealing. Thomas returned from San Francisco in 1899 with his veterinary certificate and a fiancée. Her name was Sarah, and she was the daughter of one of his professors. She was intelligent and practical, with a quick smile and a love of animals that matched Thomas's own. The wedding was held at the ranch in the spring of 1900, a joyous occasion that brought together family and friends from all over the county. Grace decided not to pursue art professionally, but instead to teach. She attended a teacher's college in Stockton and returned to Murphy's to teach at the local school. She loved working with children, and her artistic skills made her lessons engaging and memorable. William, surprising everyone, showed an interest in law. He began reading legal texts and eventually apprenticed with a lawyer in town. It seemed the Grayson children were destined to make their marks in different ways, but all of them carried the values their parents had instilled in them. In 1902, Thomas and Sarah welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Penelope after her grandmother. The older Penelope cried when she held her namesake, overwhelmed by the sweetness of the moment. She was a grandmother at 46, and it felt like the perfect continuation of the life she had built. Yates, now 49, had slowed down slightly, but he was still strong and capable. His hair was graying at the temples, and his face showed the lines of a life lived outdoors, but he was healthy and content. He had achieved every dream he ever had and more. The ranch continued to prosper into the new century. The 1900s brought new technologies and opportunities. They installed a windmill to pump water more efficiently. They bought a telephone, one of the first in the area. Yates purchased a small automobile, though he still preferred horses for most travel. On their 20th wedding anniversary in August 1906, the family gathered for a celebration at the ranch. Thomas and Sarah were there with little Penelope, now 4, and their new baby son. Grace came with the man she was courting, a kind schoolteacher from a neighboring town. William brought a law book as always, never far from his studies. As Penelope looked around at her family, at the home they had built, at the life they had created, she felt a profound sense of peace. The girl who had arrived in Murphy's full of naive hope was long gone. The broken widow who had thought she would never be whole again had been transformed. In her place was a woman who knew her own strength, who understood the true meaning of partnership, who had built something lasting and beautiful. Yates raised a glass for a toast. To my wife, who the town once called damaged beyond repair, but who I have always known was perfect in every way that mattered most. Thank you for 20 years of happiness, for 3 amazing children, and for showing me what real love looks like. Here is to the next 20 years and beyond. Everyone cheered and drank. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy. She looked at Yates across the table, this man who had saved her without trying to fix her, who had loved her exactly as she was, and helped her become more than she thought possible. "I love you," she mouthed to him. "I love you too," he mouthed back. The celebration continued late into the evening. There was food and laughter and music. The children played while the adults talked and reminisced. As the stars came out, Penelope and Yates slipped away from the crowd and walked to the place where he had proposed all those years ago. The creek still bubbled over the rocks. The hills still rolled golden in the moonlight, but everything else had changed. They had changed, grown, become more than they were separately. "No regrets?" Yates asked. "Not a single one," Penelope said. "Every struggle, every hardship, every moment of pain led me here to you. I would not change any of it." They stood together in the warm summer night, 2 people who had found each other against all odds. The town had called her damaged beyond repair, but the cowboy had called her perfect in every way that mattered most. And in believing in her, in loving her unconditionally, he had helped her see the truth about herself. She was not damaged. She never had been. She was strong and capable and worthy of love. It had just taken the right person to help her remember. As they walked back to their home, to their family, to the life they had built together, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The past was behind her, forgiven if not forgotten. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. And most importantly, she had Yates by her side, now and forever. The cowboy who had seen her heart when the rest of the world saw only damage, who had loved her perfectly in all the ways that truly mattered.